Good evening, everyone. Can I welcome you to this virtual meeting of the Business and Housing Policy Committee. The time's 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of February 2021. This is a Winchester City Council meeting held under the regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name's Councillor Anne Weir, Chair of the Policy Committee. There are a few housekeeping reminders to run through as there are new working practices in response to the regulations. First of all, can I ask everyone present in this virtual meeting to ensure your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off while you're not addressing the meeting. This will reduce background noise and avoid unintentional disturbances. Can I also advise that this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting, where it can be found next to the meeting's details, and the recording will remain there after. Members and officers, where appropriate for each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or raise a point of order or explanation, and I'll invite you to speak then at the appropriate time. Some members may not have access to the chat function, and so I'd ask you to use the raise a hand function. Each member will be invited to speak in turn, therefore I'd encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. Thank you. When speaking and referring to the presentation, please make sure you reference the page or paragraph number. And finally, if members wish to leave the meeting at any point, could they please make themselves known to me through the chat function? I'll announce the meeting that you're leaving. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to undertake a roll call of members of the committee to confirm who's present this evening?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Weir, I can see that you're present, thank you. Councillor Rutter, we have apologies from. Councillor Brooke.
Yes, I'm present. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Yes, good evening. I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Lumby.
Yeah, good evening. I'm also here.
Thank you again. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, good evening. I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Councillor Crask.
Good evening, present.
Thank you. Councillor Hiscock.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Councillor Power.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to mention any other members present, visiting members, Dave, at this stage? No. Okay.
Not at this stage, Chair. I can go on and tell you the officers that will be present as well this evening, if you wish.
That would be useful, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. The officers present this evening: Richard Botham, Strategic Director Services; Chaz Bradfield, Strategic Director of Place; Gillian Knight, Corporate Head Housing; Kenna Shan Young, Housing and Social Inclusion Manager; Amber Russell, Service Lead Housing Operations and Community Safety; Charlotte Quinn, Housing Options Manager; and Andrew Costello, Service Lead Economy and Tourism. I'm David Shaw from Democratic Services, and I'm supported tonight by Nancy Graham, also from Democratic Services. And we also have present Monica Gill and David Light representing TACT. Cabinet members are Councillor Lerney, and I think Councillor Ferguson may be joining us, and also I can see Councillor Thompson in the meeting as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. That's helpful. Are there any declarations of interests this evening? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Items relating to the HRA, I'd like to declare that I am a City Council tenant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Hiscock.
Yes, please, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest in that I'm a county councillor, and some of the items on the agenda may have some bearing on my work as a county councillor, although I very much doubt it tonight, but I've got to say it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all. We've, as Davis mentions, we've had apologies from Councillor Rutter and Councillor Power has kindly offered to help with the questions and debate when we get to that stage. Okay, I'll move on to the next item, the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes are on pages 5 to 7 of the agenda pack, and it's recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of December 2020 be approved as a true and accurate record. Should no member object, I understand that there a couple of points need to be made. Councillor Rutter should be recorded as being present and Councillor Clear as not being in attendance. Are the minutes agreed?
Agreed.
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 Yes,
you.
thank you, Chair.
That's great. Okay, moving on to item 4, the work programme for 2020-21, pages 9 and 10. Are there any comments at this stage on the work programme? If not, we will note the work programme and move on, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair, again.
Okay. Item 5, Chairperson's announcements. At this time, I don't have any announcements to make. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say, but if not, we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair.
Public participation. I understand we have no members of the public.
That is correct, Chair. No members of the public have registered to participate this evening.
Okay, so swiftly moving on to item 7 on the economy and housing restoration works. Can I just remind members that if you wish to speak on this item, please make it known by using the chat function if you can, and I'll come to you in turn after the presentation. So again, if you haven't got access to the chat function, do raise a hand. We'll keep an eye open for that. So if I could invite officers to, I think we need to move on to this, officer introduction and presentations. Councillor Lerny, oh no, Councillor Ferguson, if you're here, did you want to make any statement before we start?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think that this evening I'll let Andrew Gostelow sort of take us straight through the presentation, but I'll be happy to help answer any questions after he's done that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, are you happy for me to proceed?
Yes, Andrew, that is the case, please.
So good evening and thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. This evening's presentation is aimed at providing an overview of some of the activities the Economy and Tourism teams have been undertaking in terms of the COVID restoration plans through our work in Recover, Rebuild and Reimagine since I last presented to the committee on the 1st of December to support those businesses that have been most affected by the pandemic. The presentation will focus particularly on future plans, not only in terms of COVID related Reimagine activity, but also projects that the teams will undertake in support of the wider and longer term economic development. To that end, I hope you've had the opportunity to view the presentation. The first 10 slides provide an overview of the current statistics and activities undertaken over the last couple of months. In summary, infection rates in Winchester remain considerably lower than the national average per 100,000 of population and have halved in Winchester over the last 10 days. Rates are now lower than those reported at the last committee on the 1st of December. Currently, there were 186 cases in the last 7 days, which is equivalent to 149 cases per 100,000 of the local population. City centre footfall was up by 25% in December on the previous month. However, overall footfall is down by 58% year on year and 66% year to date. Despite this, and according to Springboard, who hold the national database for bid footfall trends, since December, Winchester experienced 6% less reduction in footfall in December and 21% less reduction in footfall since March than similar destinations. However, as you can see, our parking revenues remain significantly impacted despite the short recovery in December. And the vacancy rate in the city has continued to increase, but still remains below the national average by 2%. Despite the above, unemployment levels have remained static across the district at 3.6%, below the rest of Hampshire and the UK. In terms of grants, Winchester City Council to date has administered over £34.5 million of grants to support businesses across the district during this pandemic. In terms of the additional restrictions grant, which the economy team are administering, 155 applications were received in round 1 from the 4th of November to the 2nd of December, and which 114 businesses were eligible and were paid a total of £163,000. Round 2 will close on the 12th of February, and a further 492 applications have been received to date. This is 3.5 times the number of received in round 1, and overall the additional restrictions grants have attracted double the applications in relation to payments made in the initial discretionary grant programme. The team remains focused on this key element of work to support businesses in survival, and as you can see, a significant number of additional applications are now being made. Slide 6 outlines the 25% of the original additional restrictions grant that has been set aside for additional business support. £240,000 of that has been set aside for a hardship fund, which will be launched this Friday. This is aimed at those organisations who have either been ineligible for grants or, despite receiving grants, remain severely impacted and are at risk of closure. Applicants will be required to submit a business case and supporting evidence, and will be considered on a case-by-case basis, with grants up to £10,000. Further information can be found on the Hardship Fund tab on our business pages on the Council website. We continue to consult with our economy colleagues across the EM3 region and remain in line and ahead of many others in terms of deployment of the additional restrictions grants and our approach to longer-term business support. Slide 7 to 10 outlines our rebuild activity in December when the national restrictions were eased. The tourism team were busy delivering the Rediscover and Christmas campaigns aimed at a local audience. Slide 7 outlines some of the key results of the activity, including the Christmas film, which reached an audience of over 32,000. We then reverted to our Recover and Respond activity when Tier 4 restrictions came in on the 26th of December, followed by national restrictions on the 6th of January. Our Respond and Recover marketing activity has included our current partnership with Local IQ and The Bid, promoting the local business campaign over 6 weeks in the Chronicle, including printed articles and social media. During this period of Respond and Recover, our business bulletin and website business pages continue to be one of the go-to places for businesses to seek the latest information and advice, with a 40% upturn in subscriptions to our business bulletin since our last policy committee meeting. Slides 9 and 10 outline the marketing activity undertaken locally around the Stay Local Buy Online campaign and Virtual Winchester, along with inspirational content aimed at a wider audience within the Dream Now Travel Later campaign to raise brand awareness and influence consumer buying decisions to ensure Winchester District capitalises on the forecasted staycation post-national restrictions influenced by the limitations placed on travel corridors, and intelligence indicated that demand is likely to outstrip supply. So that covers the first 10 slides in my presentation as a summary, and if we can move on to slide 11. And slide 11 covers the current impact and the current situation. And this slide clearly illustrates the journey from the 20th of March to now, and how during that period our activity and our team have continued to be agile in our response to the movements from respond through to recover to rebuild and back again via 8 variants in 10 months. We can move on to the next slide, please. In terms of rebuild and plans post-lockdown, as we move towards easing the current national restrictions, we look to our marketing campaigns to influence the rebuild programme and support businesses who have been most affected. It will remain aimed at local residents along with a wider audience to ensure that the district benefits from the forecast staycation opportunities. We will build on the successful Rediscover and Stay Local campaigns along with thematic programmes around well-being, defined as a state of being comfortable, healthy and happy, which we feel are key messages as the country starts to adjust to the new normal. Next slide, please. The Wellbeing campaign will focus particularly on the theme of connecting with other people, families and friends, a key anticipated demand going forward, along with being active and learning messages. Given the success of our previous films, our tactical activity will include a new wellbeing and countryside film. We will revisit the previously planned Knitted King Elf Trail, which we had worked with our colleagues in market towns and partners across the city in developing to ensure that it is ready to launch as restrictions are eased. Next slide, please. And we will also continue to work with our county, regional and national partners, including Hampshire County Council, Tourism South East and Visit Britain, to ensure that we capitalise on opportunities at that level. We have recently taken part in a virtual Tourism South East National Excursions event aimed at the group travel trade, a key market for the district. Tourism South East are also running a Love Where You Live regional campaign, which aligns well with our Love Winchester programme. And also we work with Visit Britain, carrying the Escape the Everyday at Home programme, which aligns with our virtual Winchester activity and will potentially align with the staycation opportunity going forward. Next slide, please. Partnership activity has remained paramount in all of our recover, respond and rebuild programmes. Engagement with key stakeholders and groups has helped join up thinking, shared agendas, collaborative work and economies of scale. It is anticipated that this escalated partnership approach will remain a legacy benefit post the pandemic. The latest round of engagement meetings have taken place with all market towns and Whiteley. These enable discussions around key topics, including recently the movement strategy and with more immediate activity in terms of COVID and recovery. The City Centre Partnership is made up of a senior group of key stakeholders from the education, arts, heritage, retail, emergency services and property sectors from within the city, chaired by Clive Cook, with its immediate priorities will be to work in partnership on 2 key topics of climate coalition and a cultural manifesto. Next slide, please. The high streets and neighbourhood shopping areas across the district remain a priority as businesses in these areas have been significantly impacted. We are working on a short-term action plan and longer-term strategic plan around the recovery of the future of the high street. This is partly in response to the previous meeting and also the emerging work stream pre-COVID. Initially, we will be keen to establish the levers that WCC can take to influence short-term actions directly and with our key stakeholders. We will look to reflect our wider current and longer term strategic plans in our initial plans, including, for the city as an example, elements of the tourism of the town vision, which work has already started. The challenge clearly is to mitigate the risk of decline, deliver a sustainable high street offer, meet the demands of our current future users, reflect the changes in the high street profile and character, and further improve the low vacancy rates, with an outcome of remaining competitive and ahead of the game. The priorities will be around driving footfall, increasing spend, lengthening dwell time, creating immediacy of visit, and strengthening the opportunity to return. Through benchmarking and acting, developing short and long-term plans, and lever investment, with an outcome of a dynamic offer and attracting a wider demographic, with a tactical principle of repositioning, reinventing, rebranding, and restructuring where required. Next slide, please. As part of that high street priority, we have procured digital islands to provide a dedicated business support programme to those businesses who are most impacted. Funded by the RHS grant received via EIDF and government, this programme will reach 750 businesses with dedicated business support portal achieving 450 businesses in registration, 75 businesses receiving one-to-one business support, 250 businesses participating in its webinars, and a resultant 6 case studies. And this activity is already taking place and will continue to the end of March. As mentioned previously, £625,000 of additional restrictions grant has been ring-fenced for rebuild business support. This is likely to take the form of extending a dedicated business support service for those businesses most affected by the pandemic, a resilience and adaptation and diversification and transition fund for those businesses needing support in making those necessary steps to ensure long-term survival, a business survival dedicated fund which will sit on the crowdfunding platform, along with further marketing and promotion to raise awareness, drive web traffic, footfall and spend to our businesses across the district. Next slide, please. Continuing in the theme of supporting high streets, neighbourhood shopping areas and rural-based businesses across the district, we will be investing in a virtual high street initiative to support businesses during national restrictions, but also in legacy to reflect the forecast change in consumer buying habits. This programme has generated a significant amount of interest and support from across the district. Winchester City Council will fund the development, launch, marketing and operating costs of this platform for the first 6 months. It will provide businesses with an existing online presence and coordinated additional route to market, along with facilitating those that have not yet or are in the process of making such changes to their business model. It provides the opportunity for businesses to test this environment, but with an initial low-risk investment. From a consumer perspective, it will offer a one-stop shop to showcase independent businesses across the whole district, also with the ambition of a coordinated single home delivery mechanism. We are currently preparing the procurement process part of this and the successful bidder will be required to ensure that this platform is self-sustaining after the first 6 months with competitive, small ongoing operating costs for the businesses engaged. Next slide, please. As we continue to look forward post-pandemic and how we will all operate in the new normal, the Sports and Leisure Park is still on track despite COVID to open in spring 2021. This does not only offer our residents a revised opportunity to spend their leisure time and pound, but also for that of our incoming visitors. The festivals and events programme continues to be key to offering incoming visitors that immediacy of visit message, but also our residents in terms of their leisure time. Key opportunities include the Design Festival, still on plan for October, which will showcase what is here, and a move to the planned date for the Hat Fair, which as officers we are in conversations with the organisers. But also we look to re-energise the Festival and Events programme for 2021 and 2022, working with the Festivals group and looking to develop a team of stakeholders to look strategically at how this offer can develop over the next 5 years. Creating employment space remains key to recovery and the changes envisaged in terms of work patterns. Our Inward Investment Officer is working with our estates team in a programme to establish the current and address the demand for flexible and shared workspace across the city. Next slide, please. With that change in work patterns in mind, we are working with Hampshire County Council in targeting the businesses in the top 10 London boroughs that our outbound commuter data indicate they travel to. This will include social media and a dedicated mailing, which will present our current and potential available office space across the districts, currently in the region of over 250,000 square feet of available office space, with a typical range of 5,000 to 25,000 square feet. In the longer term, this activity will support us continuing to develop our relationships with such businesses who might consider investing in the development of new office space for their staff who do live locally in the longer term. Next slide, please. And in terms of Reimagine, the initial procurement of the Green Economic Development Strategy was undertaken, but the decision was taken not to appoint, but to re-tender with a revised brief to encourage applicants to demonstrate a more ambitious and creative approach. The request for quote is on the government's contract finder and to date has attracted over 400 views. As outlined, the deadline for applications is the 1st of March, with a contract commencement on the 29th of March and completion by the end of July. To reiterate, the economic development strategy will create a shared vision for how Winchester District can transform to become a sustainable, inclusive, digital economy over the next 10 years, based on evidence, engagement and debate, council plan priorities and the need to address the climate emergency. It will address how the economic shock of COVID can be used as a springboard to transform the economy to a greener, more technologically driven, creative economy. And indeed what the scale of transition is needed from where we are to where we need to be. And finally, the Digital Winchester Task and Finish project, the resident survey and evidence portal are now live on our business pages. A press release is live on our website, and we hope that the Chronicle will cover this story in this Thursday's edition, and this will add to our activity to raise awareness and drive traffic to the survey and the evidence portal. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Sorry, I've got an echo going. I'll try again. Okay, I'm assuming that's all right, that you can hear me. That was fascinating and quite surprising. What a move forward your team is making. Phenomenal work, both keeping the grants moving out, working with the revenue and benefits team undoubtedly, but also really starting to build that picture of how we move out of the situation that we and the rest of the country finds itself in at the moment. Really encouraging to hear about the amount of collaboration that's going on. Obviously, the priority is being given to the high street and the visitor economy. I guess some would like to see more active engagement with other parts of the economy. Maybe you or Councillor Ferguson would just like to comment on how that balance is likely to shift.
Indeed, we were just talking about that earlier on this afternoon. Councillor Ferguson, would you like to sort of summarise our discussions?
Yes, I mean, I think what we've had to do and what it's right that we've done is to support those sectors of the economy that have been most severely hit during this period. In fact, it is the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors, as we know, and they are an important part of our overall economy. I think it's probably fair to say that what we've tried to do during this period is really to stand shoulder to shoulder with the businesses most affected and to offer them the support that they need, fighting really for every visitor, every shopper, every increase in footfall that we can get, but also building confidence and making sure that people feel safe coming to Winchester. And that's during a period of such massive uncertainty. But moving forward, when we move forward, what we're looking to really is in some ways a slightly different approach to what's gone on before. We're not looking for one big project that's suddenly going to somehow drive the economy going forward. What we're really looking at is transformational change. And that's coming about in sort of three ways. The green economic development strategy that we are seeking to procure consultants for is fundamental in helping us to make the transition to a greener, more sustainable, more digitally enabled economy. And it really will be very important in providing that roadmap that we need to make that transition. But vitally, it will be a document that we get the buy-in from the whole business community so that everybody is moving forward together with a shared vision. So that piece of work is really important and we're focused on that. The other piece of work really is around the digital economy. We know that things are changing. We know that if we are going to compete in a knowledge-based economy, we have to get the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure right. So I'm really pleased that we have this digital task and finish group. That work is sort of starting now, and it will be fundamental in helping us to understand what the needs of our residents are, what our business needs are, in terms of making sure they have that economic resilience to compete and to drive forward. The work that we're doing around the partnership as well is also really important, because Winchester District's future prosperity isn't going to happen just as a district. It's through partnership working that we will prosper and that we will move forward. So the work that we're doing sort of with our partners across the district, with market towns in the city, the work that we're doing with other local authorities, the fact that we've been so successful in bringing funding into the district during this really difficult period, whether it's been the High Street Recovery Fund, whether it's been the Enjoy Summer Safely Fund. We currently have a joint bid out for the Digital Future Fund. All of that work is paying dividends. And we know that if we work with other local authorities, if we work with the broader county, that we will push forward the city and the district's resilience over time. So I think that's really important. So the green economic strategy, the work we're doing about digital, the work we're doing about strengthening, building those partnerships, all of that is what will take us forward into the future. And it isn't a revolution, but it will be an evolution and it will be transformational over time. Chair, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. That was very comprehensive. Councillor Power, do I have any questions?
Councillor Hiscock, please, and then myself.
Okay, Councillor Hiscock.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, first of all, how this isn't a question, but the staff have done very, very well there. The team's come up with a fantastic presentation. It's very encouraging to see all that. What I was wondering now is, what are the specific, or what particular challenges are there to develop the green economy in Winchester, and who else is in the field is challenging that?
Councillor Ferguson, would you like to take that, or Andrew, are you able to come back on that?
Councillor Ferguson, I think you've got your mic on.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hiscock, for your question. I think that there is a challenge for us, and that is exactly why we are looking to, why we have commissioned, or we're looking to commission this piece of work around the green economic development strategy. There are other organisations that are looking at how businesses can be more sustainable going forward. In fact, I was at a meeting today with a Wessex Green Hub with Councillor Murphy, who's our cabinet member for the climate emergency, and they are looking at how we can make our business economy more sustainable over time. Obviously, we have local groups like WINAC, but for us, we need to look at the whole district. We need to look at what transition we need to make over time, over the next 10 years, to get to a greener, sustainable, as near to zero carbon economy as we possibly can get. And I think that we recognise we do need some specialist help to help us come up with that plan. But the key in all of this, I think, as I just said, is that we work with our businesses, because they too are looking at their carbon footprint. They too are looking at the climate emergency. So we need something where we together have a shared vision for where we want to go and how we're going to get there. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. I have three now, Councillor Power and Councillor Brooke and Councillor Lumby, and I think Councillor Horrell, I see you there as well. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Costello, I do need to thank you for your team's work on getting the grants out. It's been very much appreciated locally, and also for the presence of your people on the ground supporting the retail centre. My question relates to emerging thoughts on what both market town high streets and the larger shopping centres will look like in the future. Is there any emerging consensus on how those are going to change?
Thank you very much, Councillor Power. I'm certainly happy to start a response to that, and maybe Councillor Ferguson may wish to add a comment at the end, and thank you also for your kind comments about the team's work. In terms of the future of the high street, this has been a topical discussion for some time, even pre-COVID, and COVID has most certainly brought that to everyone's particular attention and exacerbated the situation. There is a significant amount of research and activity around the topic, and we are engaged with that as well, and that will be informing a lot of the plans that we start to develop, and indeed bring those plans to this policy committee for comment and contribution. But clearly, both market towns and city centres, the landscape of retail and the look and feel of those areas have already changed and will continue to change. And the challenge is around developing, or the research is showing around developing very much an experiential element to what the high street has to offer. So moving away from some of the traditional retail activities, and that is indeed why, certainly from the independents perspective, we're looking at this e-commerce platform, because we know that consumers are telling us that yes, they want to still support independents, and yes, they will sometimes come out to purchase directly from independent businesses, but then equally they'd be very happy to purchase online as well. So we have that sort of aspect going on in the background, but the wider experiential offer of high streets with a more diverse range of opportunities, not just around food and drink, but different types of activities that adds to that wider experience to ensure that residents and potentially visitors continue to use high streets, but in a very different way.
Thank you.
And the only thing I would add, Councillor Power, is that we do know that there's a prediction that we will see a 30% reduction in pure retail. But what we want to try and do is to keep those active shop fronts. So we still have something happening in the shop fronts, whether it's hospitality, whether it's experience, as Andrew says. The other thing as well is we are very much looking to the strategic work we want to do around festivals, is looking at how can we use those to drive that currency, how can we use those to enliven our high streets, to make them always have something new where people want to visit. The same with our markets. We need to look at our markets and say, what can we do with our markets to offer something new or something different? And I think, again, the research, when you look at it, it talks a lot about how even retailers on the high street are going to have a hybrid offer. So they have to accept that we can't go back to the way things were. So even if I have a physical store, within it, I may have to have some kind of digital offering. And even if someone comes into my store to buy something the first time, they may want to possibly not purchase while they're there, but then purchase online. So the work we're doing around the e-commerce platform, the work we want to do around the restoration funding that we're looking at, the grant funding, is to help those businesses gain that economic resilience so they can remain on the high street, but they can tap into this shift that's happened in people's purchasing patterns. So there's a lot of change coming, which is why the focus, one of the focus piece of work that I've asked the team to do, is to look at the strategic plan for the high streets going forward, not just Winchester, the high streets across the district, and also to look at an immediate sort of 12-month recovery plan. And I'm hoping that we'll bring that back to this committee, when we started to work those pieces of work up for comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Power, I've got Councillors Brooke, Lumby, Horrell, Crask and Bell. Is that
That's what I have as well, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and thank you for the excellent informative presentation. But there was lots of references to things going on around the district, but I didn't see anything specific that's happened in the district. And I feel that people outside of Winchester, when it comes to the tourism and the focus on the high street, are feeling very neglected. So I wondered if you could articulate for me some of the specific examples of things other than the brief reference to Marwell Zoo that's happened outside of the city centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. I would like to think, and certainly the presentations that I've done in the past, and indeed this presentation, covers all of the work that we do, not just in the city, but across the whole district. So, for example, things like our business support programme, our existing activity with InkyHive, and our Digital Islands business support programme is pan-district wide. We'll be supporting businesses across the whole district, whether in the city centre, market towns, or rurally based. Indeed, the e-commerce platform that we have spoken about for independent businesses to offer an online programme of activity will again be across district. all of our marketing activity, which is all about raising awareness, driving footfall when it's appropriate to do so, and talking to a local audience, covers all areas of the district, whether that be the city, whether that be the market towns, or whether that be rural businesses and rural locations across the district. So it is a golden strand through everything that we do, that we make sure that it supports the wider district in all cases.
And if I may, Councillor Brooke, there is dedicated marketing support for the market towns, and equally on the Love Local website that has been promoting individual businesses or businesses across the whole district or in specific market towns. And certainly the partnership meetings that we are having with the market towns, we seek in those meetings to find out, is there more we can do? Is there anything more that we can help with? And there are issues that come out of those, and we do address them. So I think that we are very much looking across the district, and certainly the office in the local economy team are sort of never mention just Winchester anymore. They always mention the Winchester district, because it's really important that we look after the whole place.
Thank you both. What it would be useful, I think, I seem to remember last year we did look at the spread of the grant making to businesses around the district. It might be useful at some future meeting just to look at how those grants that have been dispersed have been spread across the district and where the benefits have fallen. I think we'll move on to Councillor Lumby. I've got you next. Your question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Costello for another excellent presentation, and thank you for all the hard work that you and all the local economy team are doing. I'm, for one, particularly excited about the e-commerce potential opportunity. I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm also excited with the way that you've managed to hand out the very generous grants we've got from the government, and I think that's wonderful. We've been getting the government money, which of course is our own money as taxpayers, out to businesses. That's great. Just a few questions, if I may. Just first of all, in terms of unused space on the high streets, what are we doing to support new businesses being set up to use that space, perhaps move off market stalls into vacant space, and start new businesses with effectively support? Because the problem with obviously a lot of spaces, the business rates, are we helping people by, for example, providing lower rents where we are able? Whereabouts are we doing that? What are some examples? Is that limited to retail, or are we looking at food and beverage as well? Maybe starter restaurants, dark restaurants. What are we, dark kitchens, sorry, which is where you cook everything off site and deliver. What about office space similarly? On the subject of office space, you talked about there being a 250,000 square feet of office space available across the district. Can you break that down a little bit for me, where that space is, what's the quality? I'm aware in my own ward, the large empty office development in Chilcombe, which has stood empty for a while, but we hope to have an exciting new tenant in. What's the breakdown there? What's the demand? In terms of our office sector, what is our total office sector across the whole area? How does that break down between the city, the market towns, and other areas? And what's the anticipated demand? Because figures on their own are, may sound impressive, may sound unimpressive, but without a context, they're really not a great deal of use. Can we get a context and understand that? Maybe that's something we need to look for the future. You mentioned festivals. Can we actually understand what contribution the festivals do make to the local economy? It's a question I've actually asked before but never got an answer. So what benefits do festivals bring to the local economy? I, for one, am concerned this year that festivals actually may not bring benefits to the economy, may instead bring lots of people who may potentially be carriers of COVID, and actually that may be not what we want to achieve. But obviously in the future we do want to benefit our economy. And can you tell me, you mentioned the support for the market towns for the retail space there. What analysis has been done? What proportion of our retail space is actually outside the city of Winchester or the market towns, in those small little places like Denmead? What are we doing for those sort of areas? What conversations have we had with village shops, with farm shops, with those sort of things? To what extent have we really got the whole picture, and do we really know what's going on? And then finally, can I just get an update on the digital task force? Digital task force. Can we really rename it something I can pronounce, please? That wasn't the question. Digital. To what extent have we identified that actually we have good digital across the whole district? Where have we found there are holes? And if we find there are holes, what are we as district going to be able to do to solve that? Because clearly it's a very important part of the policy, but if it doesn't cover the whole district and it leaves holes, will we have areas left behind? Lots of stuff there, and I'm sure that we can return to some of it on other occasions when we've got the full picture and the facts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lumbey. Andrew, would you like to kick off on some of that, and we'll see how we get through it? I think there were five points that he was making there, and perhaps you'd like to hand over to Councillor Ferguson if you feel she's better placed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lumbey, for your questions and your support throughout all the work that we've been doing. In terms of things like when you talk about the unused space and what's happening on the high street, both in terms of the city and in terms of our market towns, etc., that very much fits into what we were talking about in terms of our emerging high street plan, both short term and longer term in terms of strategy. Now, some of that work has already kicked off, certainly, for example, in terms of the city, through the tourism, through the town vision, and we're in conversations with our estates team and our planners, etc., around that. In terms of unused space and vacant spaces on the high street, we are in discussions around activities that could take place in those spaces, but also making them look better as well in terms of potential branding on those particular spaces too. So there is work afoot that is happening, but more work needs to be done and will continue at a pace over the coming months. When you touch on office space and demand, that's where I was talking about earlier that Mark Flesher, our Inward Investment Officer, is working with our estates team and also through the estates team, commercial landlords, etc., to assess our current office space, the quality of that office space, which is varied, I think which we know, and where that office space is located, and looking at the demand and supply potentially of that, and that obviously fits into the work that, as I mentioned, we're doing with Hampshire County Council in terms of looking at our outbound commute and where those commuters, those top 10 locations that those commuters are going to in London to start that dialogue as well. So all of that activity is in train and will continue over the next couple of so months. In terms of the festivals, it has always been my view, and I think it's a shared view, that festivals and events and the cultural offering for Winchester has been a strong strand in our overall offer. And indeed, I think it most definitely should continue to be. One of the key things is that what it does generate is what I term as immediacy of visit. So we are very lucky as a district to have some, a lot of history, a lot of heritage, some fantastic outdoor spaces, some amazing market towns. And they in themselves act as a driver for people to visit and for residents to spend their leisure time and leisure pound. But what festivals and events do is create that immediacy, because these are one-off occasions that are happening, and that's what makes the visitors come at that moment, or residents to stay within that district at that time. And of course, what that also does is offers that wider, more vibrant appeal, so we can continue to attract people to live, work and play in the city, and also potentially in terms of an inward investment opportunity and businesses coming into the whole district, not just the city, that they will actually look to invest in our areas, because there are those sorts of things such as the Vibrant Festivals programme that is attractive to residents that live here. In terms of the digital task force, obviously that has only sort of recently kicked off, and our work in terms of the resident survey and in terms of the evidence portal that has been launched will start to help us create a clearer picture of where the holes are and where the requirements and the demands and the priorities need to be placed, not just by us as a City Council, but also by our third parties that we may well work with. I think I've covered most of the points, but I'm sure Councillor Ferguson may have some additions to add.
Thank you, Andrew, and Councillor Lumby. Thank you for your questions. I think some of them, Andrew's obviously answered a lot of them, but some of the specific detail that you asked for, we can certainly try to provide as Mark Fletcher's work sort of intensifies in this area. You talked about empty space in the high street and what we're doing to let that. The thing that people often forget about the high street is actually on our high streets we have multiple landlords who own one or two properties or a set of properties, and each of them have different ambitions for those properties, and many of them are still trying to adjust to this new world where they can't rely on getting a long-term tenant at a rent that they're perhaps used to. So it is certainly about, in terms of that partnership working, and particularly in the city with the city centre partnership, talking to landlords about how they approach this problem, and perhaps being a little bit more flexible. There is quite an interesting endeavour to look at whether there could be some kind of pop-up retail happening in the high street. Almost we could have venues or units that are rented out, almost like a retail Airbnb, where retailers could rent that space for a certain period to test their products, to test the market, to test the concept. And I think that would feed very well into allowing startups or new business concepts to sort of try the market. So we are talking to landlords about that idea, and there are one or two people out there who are promoting that at the moment. In terms of office space, you said, what is the demand? I spent quite a lot of time recently on a whole series of seminars about office demand. And one of the things that's really struck me, and the thing that's coming out, is not only is there definitely downward pressure on rent, there is also a lot of evidence to suggest that many companies are looking to shed up to 30% of the office space they currently have, because they They don't no longer think they need it. They think they're going to reduce staff numbers, and they're also looking to reduce cost. In fact, on one recent webinar I sat through with KPMG, one of the statements that a senior analyst made was the golden age of needing more and more office space is now over. But who can predict what the demand will be? It is interesting that I recently looked at a presentation that was done to Push about their employment-led needs, and they made the point, and this was very recent, that in the past, those in the Push area were recommended to increase office space. And what they found is that office space wasn't actually used. And what businesses were doing was looking to upgrade or choose what they already had more effectively. I think that what we need to do, and the work I've started asking the officers to do, is look at what we have and look at how we fill that with employers who perhaps want to move out of the city, who are looking to create a regional hub, who are perhaps looking to downsize to a different area, but also who want to locate in an area where they know that there is a really good residential, talented, highly educated workplace, and that's what we have in the Winchester district. And I think that that is part of our plan, because we do want to create high quality, well-paid jobs in the district. And equally, we do want to support our high streets across the district, and we know that workers play an important role in that. But it is really hard to know what the demand will be. The other question you asked was about what value, economic value the festivals bring to the economy. That again is something we can challenge the team to try and quantify. I know you talked to me recently about Boomtown, whether Boomtown itself brought value into the district. I can't comment, but obviously our festivals programme is much broader than that. And the design festival that we touched on earlier, I think Andrew talked about it as kind of something that would, you know, sort of give visitors or give our residents something interesting to look at. For me, something like the design festival is much more about showcasing a sector of our economy where we have real strength, showcasing those sectors in digital innovation, in media, in architecture. And I think it will do more than just drive footfall or visitor or be of interest. I think what it will do is showcase what our economy has to offer, why businesses should seriously be looking at locating within our district. The other question you asked was around, if we find holes in the digital connectivity, what can we do about it? It's a good question, because at the moment, broadband rollout sits with Hampshire County Council. Also, it should be noted that recently the government actually decreased the amount of money it was spending on broadband enablement. So if we do find holes, it will again be that partnership working that will become very important with Hampshire County Council through the LEP to look at how we fill those gaps. And obviously, I know you live obviously in the south of the district, and there are gaps in the rural broadband provision. And we currently have lots of community groups across the district trying to access the rural gigabyte programme to allow them to get that connectivity that they need. But that's why the Digital Task and Finish group is really important. If we understand the gaps, then we can look at solving the problem. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. There was a small question, I think, in Councillor Lumby's long list around retail space in smaller communities and what we're doing to protect that. Sorry, Councillor Lumby.
No, I think thank you for remembering that. That was the one that I spotted, seemed to have slipped through as well. So thank you.
What I was going to propose on that particular question, Councillor Lumby, is we might just note that one and raise it also with the development team, the local plan team, looking at what we're doing in those areas, because I think that's a question for our relationship with parish councils, particularly where we're looking at very small communities and local shops that you alluded to. So if you don't mind, I'll note that, and we'll make sure that that is followed up and possibly come back to a future meeting with a response on that particular one.
That would be very, very kind, Chair, if that's okay for the team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I move on to Councillor Horrell, please?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to ask a couple of follow-on questions, and thank you to Andrew for his presentation. My first really revolves around sort of our open spaces and the outdoors, and a question, is there further opportunity for us to develop those facilities? And we have extensive facilities across the district. As Councillor Ferguson said, it is a district-wide opportunity to really draw on people being attracted to our open spaces and the countryside, as opposed to just into the city centres, excepting of course the city centres. The market towns have businesses that are clearly looking for throughput. So it's just a question, is there more that we could do to bring that to fruition? You mentioned, Andrew, in your presentation that you were ensuring that the district virtual initiative, High Street initiative, should ensure that those businesses that participate don't suddenly find 6 months in, when Winchester pulls away from their funding, that they're then hit with a large bill. And I suppose my question is, what are we doing to ensure those who do commit to this idea, and it's certainly a good one for those who haven't taken the initiative already, that we protect them suddenly falling foul of significant increases as we go forward? I just wanted to also ask a question about events. There seemed to be quite a lot of focus on sort of reimagining and rethinking events, but to the best of my knowledge, I think we've been responsible in Winchester for 60, 70, 80 events per year. I think probably closer to 80 events a year. And we've become really well known for that, and the breadth of experiences, culture, arts, food and drink that we have embraced, and I think that's been a wonderful thing for the district. And so my question is, you know, there are many there sat in the sidelines that were hugely successful, and about reintroducing those as opposed to just saying we need to go and find new ones. So I'm just trying to understand the balance between re-energizing the ones that have been here and hugely successful, and though why we're sort of trying to seek out new. Is there an issue there? I'd also like to just challenge page 29 of your presentation, where you talk about creating new employment space, because many of the spaces detailed there, if you look at the budget papers that have already been published that will come to in council in a couple of weeks, many of these facilities are not going to be available in the short term. We haven't started the Bishop's Waltham Depot, we haven't started the goods shed in terms of approvals and redevelopment. So the question is, you know, they're good ideas, absolutely, don't underestimate that. I'm just wondering, they're not going to be short-term solutions, they're going to be medium-term solutions. So are there other short-term solutions for employment? And then finally, if I may, could I just ask you to help me to better understand the organisations that are detailed on page 25, exactly what their remit is and who's there? And Councillor Weir, it may be a question that is worth following up on afterwards, because it's probably quite a detailed answer about all those different organisations, their objectives and the representation. I'm very happy if Chair you'd like to take that offline. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Andrew, do you want to kick off with those, and then Councillor Ferguson might want to sort of follow up? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor, for your questions. In terms of the virtual high street and the fees, we would ensure during the procurement process and as we engaged businesses that the businesses were completely aware of the 6-month programme and then the ongoing programme. In addition to that, as part of the procurement process within the specification, we are asking bidders to ensure that within 6 months, the platform and the programme becomes self-sustaining, but self-sustaining in a way that, yes, the businesses will need to make a competitive but hopefully small contribution, which will be around transaction costs, etc. And then there will be delivery charges that will be applicable for the consumers that are obviously purchasing those products. But we will absolutely make sure that it is transparent at the beginning of that journey, absolutely, to avoid the very situation that you're describing, that businesses then come out the other end, we step away and they find it's not a sustainable business opportunity. It cannot and will not be on that basis. So that's in terms of the virtual high street. In terms of events, I absolutely agree with you, Councillor, that yes, you know, the district has been well known for its range and diverse offering of events, and we would never want to, what's the phrase, throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's not what it's about at all. It's very much looking at it at two elements here, looking at how we reintroduce to some degree in a COVID safe way, but also beyond the pandemic, those events that the district is well known for. And we know from our conversations with the festivals group, etc., that through last year and indeed going into this year, their whole business models have changed and they've delivered things digitally, and some of that will perhaps continue in legacy, and others it will change again as we get to a position where more people can meet going forward. So yes, we would very much want to look at ways, and we are looking at ways in which we can reintroduce those very effective and those very popular events and festivals for which we are well known, and then looking at our competitors and looking at the wider national festivals and events market and seeing, you know, where are the gaps for Winchester in terms of that competitive festivals and events offer, and how does that that bit of the jigsaw fit. In terms of the new employment space, etc., yes, you take on board completely what's saying, that they are more longer term ambitions. This is why we're looking at the vacant space that we currently have within the district as well, with regard that. But Councillor Ferguson may want to make some more comments on that particular subject. I think I've answered all of them, but apologies if I've missed anything there. I'm sure if I have, Councillor Ferguson will pick up for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Councillor Horrell, for your questions. I'm not sure, did Andrew answer the question around open spaces in the countryside?
I don't think you did, but thank you.
No, I didn't. Can I just add to that? Apologies, my pencil wasn't working quick enough. Absolutely, also agree that countryside and open space is a key priority and a key offer for what we have to our residents and also to incoming visitors. And indeed, you heard me speak earlier about as part of our Rebuild marketing campaign, we are looking around a well-being theme, which very much looks at countryside and open spaces. And indeed, we will be putting together a wellbeing and countryside film because of the success that we've had with that particular marketing medium through Christmas and through our COVID activity. So yes, we will be looking at countryside and open spaces as a key strand of our work to encourage residents to stay within the district, but also to bring visitors in, and that sits closely and aligned to how that work then sits with our market towns and with the city, and actually driving footfall in and out of those areas and spreading that benefit across the whole district. Apologies for missing that point.
And just to build on that, Councillor Horrell, the staycation bonus that we're being promised, that hopefully will be coming if restrictions are lifted and people aren't travelling abroad, very much promoting, what we have to offer as a whole district in terms of getting people to come and visit, overnight or maybe for their week's holiday is going to be really, really important. And we're really blessed in the district. We have beautiful countryside, and I think most of us who live here have really appreciated it during the last year. And also, just if I can backtrack slightly, Councillor Lumbie did ask a question which we didn't address about how we're supporting those single rural businesses that exist in the countryside. And Councillor Lumbie, just when I remember that, very much in the hardship fund that we've set up as part of the discretionary grant funding, I just wanted to say that very much is targeted at if there is a rural business that is really important to its rural community. I think you mentioned the local community shop, and they are struggling, then they really should look to that hardship fund, because we want them still to be there because they're vital for the community going forward. So just really to mention that. On the creating new employment space and the list that we've got there, the IncuHive IBM space, which is already open, functioning, that's something that we help to facilitate making that happen, to make that connection between IncuHive and IBM, that 14,000 square feet. I think they already have occupancy rates of over 60% taken, so that's already there. I believe that Councillor Lurney on the Bishop's Waltham Depot, when she's been questioned on this in other meetings, she has made it clear that she expects those business units to be completed and up and running at the end of the year. I quite agree the goods shed is currently in that feasibility stage, and obviously King's Walk is the first phase of the central Winchester regeneration, which we're hoping to bring forward. But I agree with you, that's still ongoing. The shared workspace review is something that I asked the local economy team with the asset management team to do, with a view for, where is it we could create that space now, and who could we work with to bring that space forward quickly. I know some people have suggested when Debenhams becomes vacant, the ground floor of Debenhams could make an excellent shared workspace. I'm not sure the current owners of that building have the same aspirations, but there are other opportunities, and some of those opportunities may even be in the council's own stock. The other thing that we are also doing is, I know the asset management team are looking really closely at what assets we own and making sure that there may be opportunities to bring those back into employment very quickly. And it is quite interesting that there is more interest in certain buildings than there has been for some time. So people are looking to move into the district and particularly into the city at this time. So I hope that clarifies a little bit around those points. Thank you, Councillor Horrell.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, does that...
Thank you, and could we take that other one offline, Councillor Weir? That would be kind if you'd accept
we'll get
to do that.
A response on that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Councillor Ferguson and to Andrew. Thank you.
So I have Councillor Krask and then Councillor Bell. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. Probably won't ask too many questions because I think, Andrew, you probably had a lot to deal with this evening. But just an observation, really. I think when we look back on this in the future, I can imagine that for yourself and the other officers, you might think of it as a great experience. I mean, if I listen to what you're talking through, I can see that you've got a greater sense of business in general and of businesses across the district, and the commercial skills of you and the other officers have certainly been increased, it seems. What you're dealing with right now in terms of supporting businesses across the district and thinking strategically, I can't imagine that you had planned for that this time last year. So it's impressive to see what you and the other officers are developing, and the strategic stuff you're thinking about in terms of the virtual online support for our smaller independent stores is fantastic. Targeting the London boroughs and looking at how to support companies that want to move opportunities or venues closer to their workforce is great, and clearly the digital space also. So really good to see those thoughts coming through. Not surprising around the kind of comparative drop off in footfall compared to other locations. I think Winchester, you know, we've got a lot to be proud of, a lot to be excited about in terms of, you know, the pace of our recovery. I mean, if you look at towns like, you know, near us, like Basingstoke and Southampton, then there's a lot more excitement and reason to come to Winchester in the district than there is to those other major cities near us. So I think a lot to be positive around. I think it does call on us, though, to continue to promote Winchester district as a whole, and make sure that people know about us and want to come to us. And to take every opportunity that we have to get them to spend money in our towns. And a question, I think, for me around the sports and leisure park. For me, that's, I think, a massive attraction, you know, not just across the district, but outside the district as well, for people to come to Winchester as and when it opens. I'm interested in how your thoughts on how we might get those people that go to the sports and leisure park. How can we get them into the town? How can we get them spending money? So it's you mentioned it in the presentation, but interested as to how we could get people who come to the sports and leisure park, how we get them from that leisure park, how we get them into our town, how do we get them into Winchester to go to restaurants and shop? Any thoughts on how we can best do that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Krask. Andrew, do you want to pick that up quickly? I just point out to colleagues that time is moving on. I think we've had a really good discussion, but we do have a second half to our meeting. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Krask, and I will endeavour to respond to that quickly. Thank you very much for your summing up of everything we've been up to over the last 9 or 10 months, and yes, I think you're absolutely right that if we wind the clock back, we certainly didn't envisage, even when we went into the pandemic in March or April, that we would still be talking about it now, and I don't think I'm any different to anyone else across the country would say a similar thing. You are absolutely right that in terms of legacy, it has drawn us, amplified our partnership activity across the district and with our stakeholders. It has generated a more depth of understanding of our businesses and our sectors within the district, and all of that is really good intelligence and data and experience for us to build on the reimagine and the economic development strategy and the future over the next 1 year, 5 year and 10 years for the whole district. So whilst this has been a very challenging time, the legacy will be very beneficial for us as well. In terms of your final question, in terms of the sports and leisure park, we would certainly be working with our colleagues across the council and also with the operators of the leisure park to develop specific marketing activity and communications with their membership and with their users to work and to ensure that message is very clear, that whilst the user of the sports and leisure park is benefiting in terms of what that has to offer, but also take the opportunity to drive that footfall and drive that spend across the city and wider as well. So yes, the sports and leisure park will be a key message in our future marketing campaigns, both in terms of the visitor economy, but also in terms of inward investment as well, and the wider economic development and prosperity of the district. So plans are in their early stages, but will continue to be developed over the coming months as we move towards opening, and that certainly is an area that's in my focus at the moment. Thank you.
And Councillor Crask, if I may just add, the Dream Now, Travel Later campaign that we're running at this time is all about keeping the district and what we have to offer very much at the forefront of people's minds. They can't visit right now, but as soon as they can, you know, there's a lot on offer here. So that is very much about making sure we keep our brand uppermost in people's mind. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Crask. I'm going to take Councillor Bell's question now. Again, Councillor Bell, if we can keep it reasonable.
I know, very quick, I know. I understand. If I can just ask, people have asked about outside the centre and into the district, but if I can just ask if we can have a look with, you know, with a magnifying glass down to the very smallest. If you take the smaller villages, and I count Hursley as one of those smaller villages, we have adapted, and we've adapted very successfully. We have a butcher and a community shop and post office, both of whom have occupied the highway. I know it's a highway. It's also the bus pull-in with gazebos, and we now have doubled our retail space out into the street, out into the road, out into the off the road. That's fine for the moment. I know that Hampshire are sort of turning a blind eye, if you like. We know that it's a bus pull-in. Stagecoach have decided to move the bus stop. Thank you. However, post-pandemic, this has been very beneficial to us. Post-pandemic, I don't know whether we will have permission to have these gazebos outside our stores. They double our retail space. They make it very safe in a pandemic environment and so on. But going forward, these are good retail spaces where we can put stuff on sale, where we can put out our newspapers in the case of our local village shop, croissant on a Saturday or Sunday, and so on. But the fact of the matter is, we know that in once the pandemic is over, we may be visited by highways to say you can't use this space. I just wanted to flag that up. We have no parking space in Hursley. There is absolutely nowhere to put a car park at the moment, because the pubs are not functioning properly. We can use their space, but they will come back and they will be full. So is the city going to look at these smaller spaces where we're doing well? We're serving the local community. Out in the sticks in Hursley, we've got farm shops that are doing very, very well with an online offer, you know, online order and collect and so on. But post-pandemic, I hope we don't have to just pull everything back in and just, you know, go back to square one.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Andrew, you might have a quick response. I think this dovetails in to some extent to the question that Councillor Lumby raised about small.
It does as well.
And what I proposed in response to Councillor Lumby was that I take this up with the local plan teams, and we do consider, perhaps in conjunction with parish councils, discussions with them, what the needs might be in that area as we move forward post-pandemic. So, Andrew, if you've got something quick you'd like to say on this, please do. I think that we're getting close to time where we need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I haven't got anything particular to add, other than just to reflect on, you've heard me say several times throughout this presentation and questions around legacy, and what you described, Councillor Bell, is all about legacy and where those best practices and those change of operations have taken place during the pandemic. And whilst we can't guarantee what the future rules will be, certainly we as an economy team would be having those discussions with our colleagues throughout the City Council, throughout Hampshire County Council and our parish councils, as indeed Councillor Weir indicates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I think we've had a very useful and wide-ranging discussion, and I think it's a really important topic at this time. Councillor Horrell, I can see your hands up. Did you want to go into debate?
Sorry, no, Chair, that's a hand up from earlier. Thank you.
Fine. Apart from that, I'm assuming that we've all had a good chance to air some thoughts on this. I've picked up a couple of points that we will take offline and have a look at in more detail, and either come back directly to councillors or bring it back to the next meeting. But I would again like to thank Andrew, the economy team, Councillor Ferguson, for the phenomenal work that you're doing, both in practical terms day to day and in the forward thinking that's beginning to emerge in how we bring Winchester district through the pandemic and out into the future. So thank you again for the effort that you've put in this evening. We look forward to hearing progress at the next meeting of this committee. Okay, I think we'll move on now. If nobody has any objections to the next.
Chair, you're on mute. You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. I think I saw Mr. Botham there. Are you taking this topic, Mr. Botham?
I will do, Chair, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, David, are you ready to move on to the next slide, please? Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Chair. I think at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Shaw mentioned the fact that Gillian Knight was in the meeting. Unfortunately, Gillian isn't with us today, so I'm deputising for her. What I intend to do is I'll just run through her presentation. I am conscious of the comments made last time, and it will be I will do a brief summary on the progress in each service area, and I'll do my best to highlight on the things that are very current and looking forwards, rather than spending any time looking on what was covered at the last meeting. So once I've run through the service areas, I'll say a little bit about service planning moving forward over the course of the next year. I particularly want to raise something around our support for vulnerable tenants, which is something which is putting increasing demands on teams, and I just want to highlight some of the emerging issues and our thinking in respect of that, and give a brief update also on the work of the informal group around housing for younger people and the Next Generation Winchester project. What I've also done since the scrutiny meeting last week, where Councillor Lumby raised questions around potential for setting a lower rent increase, I have added a couple of slides to this presentation just to touch on that and what potential offers to tenants could be, and how we recommend to take that forward. So I'll cover that when I get to it. I'll do my best to get through the presentation quickly, which will allow more time for questions, Chair. So Dave, go on to the next slide, please. Just kick off with the new homes team. The latest controls have not had significant impacts on our development sites. Work at the Valley progresses well. We're anticipating completion in May. We have already started the lettings process there, and we've contacted people across Hampshire Home Choice, making sure they're aware of the local lettings criteria, so that if they feel they've got a local connection with Sandwell, they get their application in now. So that's something we feel is quite important. We have a major scheme in Kingsworthy, which is completing in June. More current than that is the work in Week at Rodings Road, which should be completed this month. And at Cabinet tomorrow, the HRA report will be setting out funding over the next 10 years to deliver the 1,000 homes target that the council has talked about for some time as well. We have a live planning application for a significant scheme in Whittle, which, if approved, will probably be the major scheme of next year. And members will be aware of the nitrates challenge that all Hampshire districts are currently facing, and we as a developer obviously are affected by that as well. So we're looking at options at the moment to how we can keep our schemes deliverable through either buying credits or doing works to our own sites to generate credits. So I'll touch on that a little bit in our service planning as well. So next slide, please, David. With regard to our tenancy services, we've put a lot of work into supporting tenants through this period. Current arrears are at approximately 2% of rent roll, which is within the target for this year was to keep arrears within 2%. So we're pleased to see that is pretty much on target there. We have 20% of our tenants currently claiming universal credit. A number of the changes that the national scheme has made has helped us to work with our tenants to sustain tenancies, making quicker payments and quicker reviews that have really helped that. The current controls have had an impact on some of our older persons housing schemes. We have had to maintain communal areas as closed. We have a couple of schemes at the moment which we've had to block access to as well. And the sheltered housing team are working on maintaining contact with those residents that require additional support throughout this period. So whether that's through making additional calls or visits or whatever. Our voids process continues unchanged, so that hasn't been affected by the controls other than through demand. And all other general tenancy services are continuing as normal. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. Our property services many of our property services were suspended in the first lockdown. That isn't the case this time. The government guidance has changed, and we have maintained a business as usual approach, very much risk assessed and led by the demands of our tenants. So if our tenants want us to come in and undertake repairs, and we're continuing to do that where we can do that safely. No significant backlogs. There will be some because obviously some tenants are choosing not to register repairs. So we'll pick up on that obviously as time moves on. Members may be aware we have a project at the moment regarding retrofitting insulation to some Swedish timber properties that we have. The 2 properties in Bramding. We have 26 of those properties in total. So actually the work to these 2 properties will test out how successful retrofitting insulation is and what a difference that makes for our tenants. We have had delays to starting that project as a result of the controls, but we are anticipating that will still be completed within the next 3 to 6 months. Proposals for extending all of that retrofitting programme will be brought forward to Cabinet in March. We are in the current month we're recommending that the budget provision for that programme be increased to 15 million over the next 10 years as well. Some impact, our surveyor visits have reduced, so our tenants are generally happy to let us in when we need to though. We've touched before on our fire door replacement programme, and that's one area where we've had a few supply issues, but that again, that's still continuing and pretty much as planned. So next slide, please, David. With regard to our housing options and homelessness services, we have maintained the council's reception on an appointment basis, so people who present and needing assistance can still get that from the housing team at short notice. We've had to enhance services at our temporary accommodations, our hostels. Obviously, that just the nature of those buildings makes managing the services quite challenging. and we've had to undertake more checking and welfare checks and prioritising residents for vaccines as well. So that's all in place. The national Everyone In call has continued, and we continue to have 16 individuals in emergency accommodation. And funding for that has continued, and again I'll touch on that a little bit in the service planning comments as well. Managing that accommodation is challenging, and that is making a big demand on teams, and that's something we're learning and working with our partners in how we best can affect that. But as I say, that remains a priority for us. Evictions remain suspended. There is a likely increase in demand for those services when that resumes, but as things stand at the moment, that isn't an option for us, and that quite rightly so. So if we just move on to the next slide, please, Dan. Our private sector housing team are currently commissioning a stock condition survey of the private sector housing stock. That will be inform the work of the team themselves, but more importantly, inform the work of the council with its climate emergency programme. And the retrofitting of the private sector stock is obviously going to be a key element of that 2030 target. And there's a number of national funding programmes coming forward that would require very up-to-date stock condition data to support that. So that's a really important piece of work for us. We continue to progress urgent housing complaints. HMO licensing is suspended in tenanted properties at the moment, unless it relates to a specific complaint. But we can progress that with empty properties. Our disabled adaptation service continues, and obviously where there's demand for that, it's important that does continue. We've had 49 cases this year, committed over £600,000. That's slightly behind budget, so we are looking at ways of whether we can bring that forward, but pretty much meeting demand as things stand with that service at the moment. So next slide, please, Dan. I thought it was important that I cover tenant involvement. We have Monica Gill and David Light on the call here today, and back in December Monica made quite a fair challenge, I think, to the cabinet meeting, that they felt that the TAC group weren't being consulted properly on recommendations being brought forward to meetings. I visited the TAC meeting following that and restated our commitment that we do have that documented commitment that we will consult tenants on all key HRA related decisions. I don't know if Monica regretted that challenge, because at that next meeting I think there was a whole suite of officers turned up trying to consult on a whole range of issues, and which didn't work particularly well. So we are working with TACT at the moment. We're really grateful for the efforts that they're putting in meeting us virtually. It does make consulting on a wide range of issues really quite difficult, but but that commitment remains, and I'm really pleased to see the work that Monica and her team are putting into working with us to make that to get that right. Our tenant training programme is focusing on that virtual engagement and how we can improve that. We've got plans for a newsletter, a more regular newsletter in 2021. And also we want to build on the success of the recent e-surveys that we've been doing. The last one we undertook on carbon efficient housing, we've got over 500 responses. So it's really quite a positive way in which we can reach that wider tenant group and gain the views from tenants across the district as well, which is really important, I think. If we move on to the next slide, please. As far as our service plan for the coming year is concerned, a lot of focus around the climate emergency. As I say, we're setting aside £15 million over the next 10 years to fund retrofitting works to our properties. I've already touched on the Swedish timber trial, but we are proposed. The report that will come to Cabinet next month will very much propose a fabric first approach. So how can we, significantly improve the thermal efficiency of our properties so that the actual demand on energy is less, before we start thinking about what renewable energy technology we can then install on top of that. So that's where we'll start our efforts very much on that fabric first approach. Over the course of the coming months, we also are recommissioning our gas maintenance service. So that's a really important service for our tenants. and is one of the few term maintenance contracts which actually gets into people's properties every year. So we need to get that right. So a lot of work going on at the moment to ensure we get that commission right. A lot of investment in fire safety as well, particularly around how we can reassure tenants through our risk assessment process and publication and making that available for them, and those sort of measures. With the retrofitting work that we're proposing, obviously we need to refresh our asset management strategy as well, and the focus on decent homes. And we'll maintain that focus on tenant engagement and continue to strive to look at how ways we can improve that. New homes remains a priority, and I've touched on some of the schemes currently, and if the Winnell proposals get planning approval, they'll become the major scheme of next year. And as I touched on earlier, we need to find a solution to the challenge of nitrate neutrality as well. So that's a key part of our plan. So next slide, please, then. With regard to tenancy support, I'll come on to that in a minute, but we are looking at ways in which we can significantly increase our assistance for those that need support. I've already mentioned the private sector, the housing survey, and then with rough sleeping, that commitment to everyone in. I mean, my impression is the government will extend that long beyond the current lockdown period, and it's something we should all be seeking to do anyway, and we'll continue to strive to make that temporary accommodation, or that temporary facility that we currently have, a longer term facility, and then look at other solutions where we can help make sure that nobody needs to sleep rough in the future. So move on to the next slide, please. Okay, I touched at the beginning about the issue around the support for our vulnerable tenants. So I just wanted to say a few words on the emerging pressures that we're facing. I don't think anybody will be surprised to hear that we've experienced significantly increased impact of mental health issues, not just since COVID, but over recent years that's been increasing. Partly due to sort of some services or lower investment in some services in other agencies, but certainly demand on the housing services has increased across a range of areas, and I've highlighted a few of those there. So hoarding, antisocial behaviour, neighbour disputes. It can manifest itself in so many ways. We did appoint a mental health specialist in partnership with Southern Health last year, and that's proved successful for us and really helpful in trying to address some of the challenges that we face. We've had 94 referrals in the last year, and that this sort of work is just absolutely dominating the work of our tenancy services team at the moment, as well as our tenancy sustainment team. So having a huge impact on our ability to support residents. And if we just move on to the next slide, please. And so we're currently looking at options on what we do about that. We have ongoing discussions with our partners around how we can best work together to support tenants, and developing a hoarding pathway is just one example of that. We do think there's scope for us to commission some additional support services from those agencies, so that's something we need to think about. The mental health specialist officer that we recruited last year has been invaluable to us, and our scope to potentially to supplement that service with another officer would be really helpful. So we're currently looking at ways where we may be able to fund that, whether we fund that through the HRA or whether we fund it through flexible homelessness grant that we get each year as well. We've yet to determine the best way forward with that, but I think that's something we as officers feel we want to invest more in, and it'll be, I'm just interested in member views as to whether that would be supported by members, or whether they feel there's other avenues we should be exploring there. So that it's really just teed up here for a discussion on that issue. Please move on to the next slide, please, then. Mentioned at the beginning the informal group established by this committee, the Next Generation Winchester. So that's looking at younger persons housing. Currently, we have a number of officers from this committee, a number of councillors from this committee on the steering group, and we have a project team with representatives from across the council working together on looking at this. A survey is out currently, due to close on the 18th of February. Steering group will then come together with a view to bringing a paper back to this committee in the summer, with some recommendations on options for looking at how we can greater influence the issues in relation to housing for younger people. Next slide, please, Ted. And then I just mentioned at the beginning how I wanted to just say a few words following on from the scrutiny committee on last week, where the scrutiny committee looked at were reviewing the paper on the housing revenue account, which is a very positive paper. I think everyone supported the principles of the paper, demonstrated how we have a sustainable business plan over the next 30 years, and a reasonably healthy housing revenue account as things stand. So the question, understandably, the question came about, well, shouldn't we then be considering a below inflation rent increase? And I think that was a fair question. I think it is something that you need to consider really carefully. And just wanted to make a few points on that tonight. I'm happy to take any questions members may have, but certainly, I mean, housing rents are set very much in line with a national policy. So social landlords follow that national policy of at the moment over the next 5 years. That's consumer price index plus 1%, and all the universal credit funding and other funding measures all take full account of that as well. And that's one of the key reasons why we have a healthy housing revenue account and a sustainable 30-year business plan that has some quite ambitious measures within it. Social rents will remain around between 50 and 60% of market rents, so what I would regard as an affordable rent, and so certainly we will be recommending we keep with national policy on rent setting. It is helping to deliver very positive services to our tenants, but we did then touch on, well, is there an option then for a discount or a rent-free period or something like that? And I just wanted to make a couple of comments on that point as well. So if we were to offer a discount, you're talking around over £500,000 for just a week discount for our residents, and my main question is, what would the impact be on those on benefit or universal credit? And effectively, it would mean that they wouldn't benefit from that. So the whole idea about helping people sustain their tenancies and providing support to those who most need it, well, those who most need it wouldn't benefit from that sort of a measure. So I think it is it would be a blunt measure that wouldn't achieve what I think we would want to achieve as a landlord if we were to consider that sort of thing. So I think there's probably more mileage in considering scope for targeted hardship funds. We do already provide a top up to the Universal Credit discretionary housing payment scheme. So the government give the council a significant amount of money for discretionary housing payments, but where you have a housing revenue account, you can choose to top that up. So we have topped that up for the last, I can't remember how many years, but we have to. So we do already use the HRA to fund that. That could be increased as well. So there are options around that. So next slide, please, David. So just by way of a proposal on those issues, like I say, happy to take any questions. But I think if asked for recommendations myself, I would say the rent policy is a very positive policy. That has a number of wide benefits that I certainly wouldn't recommend moving away from lightly. If you were to move away from it, it would have to be subject to significant review of the impacts and the longer term impacts on the business plan and everything else there. So certainly I would recommend that the national rent policy is a positive recommendation, and that's a recommendation that Cabinet will consider tomorrow and Council will consider in a week or so's time. What we can do is we can look around options. So I wouldn't recommend that we spend too much time looking at the option of a rent credit or a discounted period, because I just don't think that helps the people that it needs to help. What I would like to do, and picking out from benefiting from really the discussion at scrutiny, is I would like to spend some time on reviewing how we best support those tenants that need it most. That touches a little bit on the previous slides around the mental health impacts, but it can go wider than that. It's around whether there's scope for additional hardship funds or voucher schemes or assistance for our tenancy services teams work directly with people that are struggling to pay their rent. And they're well placed to know maybe a whole range of measures that may help to manage that process. So that's where I would prefer to put our efforts. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Chairman, that would be Councillors Scott and Brooke.
Thank you, Councillor Power, and thank you, Mr. Botham, for that overview of where we are at the moment. Again, I think we'd all like to pass our thanks to the housing team. As you've illustrated, there are, whilst we've largely been business as usual, there are some really critical issues starting to emerge, and I guess it's not to be surprised that we really need to get our heads around, and I'm hoping that in our discussions here we can focus on some of those points that you've highlighted today. I just wanted to kick up. I've got one question around the work on addressing carbon emissions and energy efficiency, and looking at, we're putting quite a considerable amount into this work in the coming years, in the next 10 years. Have we looked at the capacity of our trades teams, tradespeople to undertake this work? I know that the government Green Home Scheme has been struggling because there has been a shortage of accredited tradespeople to meet that meet the standards of that scheme. Have we looked at the available capacity, and if we recognise there's a shortfall in that area, is there any way through our investment in upgrading our own housing stock that we could, in a sense, partner maybe with local colleges to build that reservoir of accredited trades in the local area who can both work on our own housing stock and then perhaps also address what we find when we've done our private sector stock survey? Thank you.
Chair, happy to answer that question. I was conscious that I sort of went straight to questions before asking whether Councillor Lerney wanted to say anything about the presentation. So I don't know, would it be relevant to ask Councillor Lerney just whether she had anything to add to my presentation?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Mainly I wanted to add my thanks to TACT and to officers. I think we're all very aware that when we had our first lockdown nearly a year ago, novelty and good weather did actually help quite a lot of us get through that. But this latest lockdown has been exhausting, for staff, and finding it really difficult, working, from home in the current environment. We touched on the issues around mental health with our tenants, and I think we need to be really cognizant of that with our staff as well. So I think it's really important that we bear that in mind, but they've been doing a really good job in difficult circumstances. I think Richard covered all the main points. I would add to the issue around tenant support that I've talked to Monica Gill about this, because I think it's really important that we work with our tenants to develop the best approach rather than just deciding ourselves what we do. And she's very happy for TACT to work with us on developing options for how we can best support our tenants, but we are also obviously very happy to take members' ideas on board as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. And actually, my apologies, I should really have, before we piled into questions, asked Monica and David, really, would they like to comment at this stage on some of the issues that have been raised there? Monica, do you have any thoughts on some of the points that have been highlighted by Mr. Botham and Councillor Lerney.
Discuss this. I haven't discussed it with Paul Tax, obviously, because we haven't had a meeting, but I think we would certainly support anything that help with mental health, and with regards to helping people that are on low incomes and that can't eat. We would certainly like to discuss this, and I'm sure all TAC members would support that, no doubt at all.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that particular those proposals kind of bounced onto this agenda rather late in the day, so I'm sure Mr. Botham would intend to come back to you and discuss that in detail. Right, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. David, did you have anything to add at this stage?
Just agree that vulnerable tenants need to be catered for, and that agree with what Monica said, that it was a good idea to look at this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, well, I think that point is well made. So I don't know whether we want to come back to quickly looking at my carbon question.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Chair. As regards the proposals that we are bringing forward for investment in the very short term, I don't believe there'll be capacity issues in relation to the fabric first work. So whilst we're focusing on insulation and that will be sort of floor, wall, external, all sorts of measures, but capacity for that sort of work is okay as things stand at the moment. If we, as soon as we as a council determine on a particular route, so for example, if we determined that we wanted to install a particular technology throughout our stock, that's where capacity issue becomes a real challenge for us. Members may have seen that the capacity to build air source heat pumps, for example, at pace, at the demand that may come forward in the coming years, is a concern nationally. Is a good point made about working with local colleges about how we could develop capacity on retrofitting properties and how that would benefit both sectors, both our stock and private sector. It isn't something we've done any work on at the moment. What the business plan does include, though, is a recommendation for recruiting an energy officer. Now that alone won't be sufficient to address all of these issues, but it will help increase our capacity to respond to the sorts of work that Councillor Wirras mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Botham. Okay, I have Councillor Scott.
Chair, I've got a few questions, if I may. One is actually probably directed to you at this moment in time, Chair, is that it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and it's really sometimes unfair that housing always seem to get the second bite of the cherry. Perhaps at these meetings, perhaps this is my first question to you, Chair, that the housing team gets an opportunity to go first, so we can, because this is a big subject, housing, and it seems as if what we don't want is you, the Chair, suddenly rushing us through all the subjects and we get overlooked on some of the issues. That said, Chair, my question then to Mr. Botham and his team is, first of all, we used to have sections and papers coming through to us rather than just a sort of PowerPoint presentation. When are we going to start getting some papers coming through? Things like what's on the allocations list, things like the maintenance repair schedules that used to come through to us. You're mentioning some carbon reduction stuff. Things that are going in the walls. Well, what about repointing, and what about new windows, etc.? Some of our properties are well overdue for window replacement now. And the other thing I would really sort of like to ask is the opinion of your section when you said the tenancy service team are doing welfare calls to all sheltered housing tenants. What happens with the old deregulated shelter schemes, which still have a high percentage of elderly residents who occupy the units? do they get the same tenancy call? Because we had an incident where a lady nearly burnt her flat down, and the fire brigade came to the rescue, and thank God I was in this vicinity and managed to get access to the property to alleviate a whole block going up in flames. So, and this is a deregulated scheme. So the question is, do we need to look back at some of these schemes to actually sometimes replace back our sheltered housing again with quality scheme managers back in situ to alleviate some issues, and a certain issue that arose this week?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And just before we go on, Mr. Botham, I had been very much on the same wavelength as you, Councillor Scott, on the order of battle for these meetings, and I completely agree we need to reverse it for a future meeting. Thank you. Mr. Botham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I pick up on Councillor Scott's first question, and Amber Russell is with us, and I'll probably defer to her on the calling of the elderly residents, if that's okay. But with regard to your first point, when our more detailed paper is going to be brought to this committee, that is something I was conscious of after the last meeting, actually, where we had some quite meaty issues that were only considered later in the meeting. What I did assure members at the last meeting that we would endeavour to bring a paper on the housing company, for example, to a future meeting of this committee. And Councillor Scott, you've highlighted a really important issue for residents, and that's the our approach to asset management, and that refresh of the asset management strategy is coming forward as well. So a whole host of issues which you can't do justice in a PowerPoint presentation. So quite rightly, we want to be able to bring more detailed papers than that through to allow the policy committee to do what it's set up to do, and that's to influence future policy. And I'm very conscious of that. Where we have been challenged on this committee is because I can't remember the name of the last meeting, it was in November. This one's come around quite quickly in February, shortly after the Christmas break. So the time of officers to pull together detailed papers for this committee, it just wasn't. It wasn't there. What I have asked is that in this cycle, this meeting be rescheduled to March next time, because then that does buy that little bit of time after the Christmas break for officers to pull together the detail that members would need to look at those sort of papers. So very conscious of the point you raise. At the next cycle of meetings, we will be seeking to bring a bit more detail through, because you need that to really get to grips with and help us shape future policy. So, and I think it would help TACT and tenants generally as well. But if I could just ask Amber, could you just say something in relation to Councillor Scott's point about calls to older people that aren't in shelter schemes?
Yes, of course, Richard, and thank you. Hello, Councillor Scott. Thank you very much for your question, and yes, thanks for stepping in and being the hero the other day and putting out a fire. a man of many talents. Thank you. Yeah, no, we do have a number of former sheltered tenants that are living on our de-designated schemes. The numbers have reduced really significantly over the recent years. We don't have nearly as many as we did, say, 5 years ago, because obviously as they move out, then those properties are relet to general needs residents. But for all the ones that still remain, they are all connected to our service via a lifeline. So they've all got the ability to contact the alarm centre out of hours, and they are still all supported by our shelter team, as they would be if they were living in a sheltered scheme, albeit they wouldn't have access to activities and things like that, because those schemes like the Valley don't have common rooms anymore, but they do still get regular contact if they need it with our sheltered housing team. The lady that you helped out earlier, that you were making reference to, she was known to our sheltered housing team, and she was being supported by one of our sheltered housing officers. That officer has already visited her following the fire and has arranged for some equipment to sensor equipment to be put into her property through Hampshire County Council, and we're also in contact with the daughter, with the mum's consent, obviously, to talk about potential housing options for her. I think she's a very independent lady and wants to remain living in her current accommodation, but I think she has got quite a lot of care and support needs, and we have discussed with her already, and will hopefully be discussing with daughter as well whether perhaps a move to a full sheltered scheme or an extra care scheme might be more suitable for her moving forward. Regards to scheme managers being back on site, I mean, what we really need is this lockdown lifted so our housing staff can be back on site. I mean, they are still going out, as Rich has explained, and making support calls and talking to people who we know need assistance, but we really want to get back into the schemes and start having activities. Really fully aware that lots of our elderly tenants have become even more socially isolated over the lockdown period. We've got lots of great ideas and things that we want to do regarding digital and other measures to try and make tenants feel less socially isolated moving forward. But a lot of this kind of stuff with this client group, you do need to do face-to-face on a one-on-one basis, and at the moment we're kind of we can't really do as much as we would like, but please be assured that as soon as we can, we will be actively promoting our plans over the next months, weeks, months, what we want to do to re-engage with our tenants. I think, you know, there's lots of talks of we want to have parties and celebrations and things like that once tenants can start getting together again. We've got lots of ideas, and we will be consulting with the residents soon in our sheltered housing schemes about what things they would like to be doing once the lockdown measures are lifted. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, absolutely, and it gives me full confidence that we can actually try and get some sense of normality, community sense of spirits back, because their spirits are a little bit low. Some of the older people who are not in a scheme designated are really feeling, you know, the pinch of loneliness. So that really does reassure me that, you know, you've got some great plans moving forward when we can do to get a bit of life back out and bring their spirits back up. That'd be fantastic.
Definitely.
Beaufort, I don't want to put you on the spot about the allocations number because you may not have it, but as and when, that would be brilliant if you could email me the current state of play with the allocations list. That would be fine.
Will do, Councillor Scott. Happy to do that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Powell, can I just confirm who I've got? Councillor Brooke, and then I think Lumbie and Horrell, is that right?
Yes, Chairman, that ties up with my list.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Mr. Botham, you mentioned about the mental health person that you have in place, and I'm delighted to see that you've got that, but I just wondered what type of things they might pick up and help with, what sort of support do they actually offer, and how do residents get in touch with this person? Is it something that's widely publicised, or is this something that when the housing officers are out and about, they perhaps have some mental health first aid training and can spot people that need directly referring?
Amber, I hope you don't mind if I defer to you. I think you can probably answer that one probably a bit more succinctly than I can.
Yes, I can have a go. I didn't know whether Kenna was on the call as well, because obviously
I don't think she is.
Isn't.
No.
Oh, okay, that's fine then, because obviously she manages the tenancy sustainment service, so I didn't want to kind of overstep them. Yes, we do have a tenancy sustainment service, and we do have Davina, who is our mental health specialist, and she gets referrals predominantly from within the housing service, so from housing officers within the tenancy team, the income team, the sheltered housing team, and also through our housing options team. She does also attend meetings with the community mental health team, and then she picks up referrals from them as well, so she does work in partnership with them. You know, our tenancy team might not be aware of particularly particular issues that are tenants facing, but they might be involved with the community mental health team, so they make referrals that way as well. We haven't, we do publicise the service internally, but I know when Kenna launched the service, she wanted to try and control, because we just have one post, so we didn't do a kind of a big bang communications on that. But moving forward, if we are able to get more resources, I think that will enable us to spread the word more widely, and then potentially get more referrals from other sectors which we don't currently receive. But she does do a fantastic job, and she is upskilling other members in the team as well. So she is doing a lot of joint working with our housing officers, because as Richard pointed out, they are coming across a lot more casework with people in really poor mental health, where their mental health is really declining at the moment. I sit on the council safeguarding board, and the amount of safeguarding referrals that we're receiving through from not just the housing team, from the customer service team, from environmental health, from a wide range of teams, has really increased during lockdown. There are a lot of people out there who are particularly unwell at the moment, and it is a challenge for the team to try and assist them and work with other services who Richard pointed out are not as well funded, or can't, their remits aren't as wide as what maybe they were a couple of years ago. So yeah, my plea is for another Davina and the ability to commission some more services, because there are lots of services out there that we'd like to work in partnership with, therapeutic services in particular, which that's kind of a more than what Davina can do. So it would be good to commission some more services so we can have a wraparound package for people who are suffering with mental health.
Yeah. So this is something particularly close to.
Sorry, Councillor Brooke. Sorry, Councillor Brooke. If you want to speak, you need to come through me.
Sorry, Chair. It was just only half my question was answered. She just asked if she'd answered my question. Sorry, Chair. Apologies. You answered very thoroughly the part about how they get in touch, but not so much about what Davina actually does with regard to supporting them, only that you're hoping to engage with others. So I just wondered what sort of support you do with that.
Sorry, apologies. At the moment, she's doing a lot of her work over the telephone, so she's constantly contacting, ringing tenants who need support from her. She does also visit people as well. She advocates on their behalf. She arranges other services to come into place. She takes their cases to the community mental health team and adult services, and advocates for other services to help them as well. So it's not just her providing all the support, she's advocating for them and trying to get other things done for them. So for example, whether that's they can't manage their tenancy at the moment, they need assistance with their rent or property repairs or anything like that, she will advocate on behalf of them to try and resolve the issues that they're facing, and the issues are multiple, really.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Amber. And thank you for the question, Councillor Brooke. I mean, I think it's a vitally important area that we really understand how the council is getting involved at the moment, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the future. Thank you, Amber. My next question is Councillor Lumby.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Botham for the report, and for everybody for their ongoing hard work. I know it's been a really difficult time, so and I certainly, with my interactions with the housing team, they're doing wonderful things to support people, so I think we all agree. Thank you so much to all of you. I have two questions, if I may. The first is there was a reference on the one of the earlier pages listing the on the new homes page. It was like page 35, where it says we are reviewing options to purchase credits to support council development. This is in relation to nitrates. I don't know whether the thinking's got to on this, and I have raised this point before, but we had an experience in the South Downs where perhaps from the way it was analysed and the way it was set up, the nitrate scheme there actually could well have actually incentivised the relevant farmer to put more nitrates in the ground. So it was possibly probably rewarding good behaviour or bad behaviour by putting the nitrates there in the first place, and also was set up to effectively encourage more nitrates to be put in, so that when you measure the difference between the two, the greater the difference, the greater the credits will being given. So that sort of thing strikes me as being a really bad idea, to actually reward poor behaviour and to be incentivizing people to put more nitrates in the ground just to get some offset. A mistake, and I don't think it's a place we should be going. So can I just ask for an assurance that's something that we will take into account and so far as possible won't be involved in. The second question relates to the whole issue of the additional support for tenants with the rent increase. I am obviously worried, as I know we all are, that many tenants are struggling with what's happened in the last year. It's been incredibly tough for a lot of people. They've had costs, they haven't had the income they had before, they haven't had the work they've had before in many cases, they've had to look after children at home and all the other things that we know about. And to put another CPI plus 1% on top seems very hard at this time. Mr. Botham explained very well that there were some problems. I'd like to understand that a little better. Firstly, is it the case that that increase is pound for pound met by universal credit, so that those tenants on universal credit will not be any worse off? Secondly, is it the case that all the tenants that will apply to, or is it only some of them? Thirdly, it's really a plea. Look, you've agreed to take it away, Mr. Botham, and thank you so much for offering to do that. But in understanding it a little better and taking it away, can we please have a commitment for this to be properly looked at, so that actually we do, if there is a way we can help our tenants? And I appreciate, we talked about a week's rent. I think the size of the increase means it actually it will be about 5 days free, but what I'm saying, can this please be looked at, and can we hear back promptly? We obviously got the budget debate at council relatively soon. If we can use this to help people, I would like to find a way and to get commitment, and I'm sure others agree with that, rather than it potentially being taken off and then never seen again. So that's really the question, just a bit more clarity on how it works, and then just that commitment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lumbie. We do have a proposal before us, and maybe we could focus on that when Mr. Botham's answered your first question, and then have a look at this proposal in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Lumbie's questions. Sorry, was there a question before the nitrates, or was nitrates the first one?
Nitrates was the first question, and the second.
Sorry, the option about purchasing credits. I couldn't read my own writing. Apologies for that. So yes, I mean it's slightly different in a way in that obviously as a local planning authority we're currently looking at the whole issue around nitrate mitigation and how we can work with other district councils to respond to the challenge that Natural England are setting us. And I think it's really for Natural England to determine what schemes are acceptable to them to demonstrate nitrate mitigation. So I would hope they are picking up on the sort of scheme that you're saying that's not acceptable, so that wouldn't count, and we wouldn't regard that as reasonable offset. So, but I accept that, you know, that there are a whole host of schemes coming out of the ground at the moment as people are starting to realise that there's potential here, and so. But I would wholeheartedly support. We wouldn't want to be involved in any scheme of that sort of nature. The new homes challenge is slightly different because, of course, they're coming at it from the developer point of view. So they're going to bring forward a scheme that will have a nitrate budget effectively. So they will need to demonstrate how they are offsetting that nitrate budget. Now, one option could be to buy credits from a reputable scheme, and that's something that they're considering at the moment. Probably we would prefer it to be something within our own control. So can we do something to our own land that reduces nitrate offset, nitrates, and create our own credits that way. So, for example, our sewage treatment works, we could take additional measures at our sewage treatment works, which could help reduce the amount of nitrates coming from there. I know Mr. Palmer and the New Homes team is currently working with consultants around implementing a new rebed system on some of our land that again could, provided Natural England and accept that reduces nitrates, that could help offset the budget. So not clear what the solution may be at the moment, and we're looking at a range of options, but I would wholeheartedly support the fact that it can't be one that has a negative impact on the Solent area, and I would hope that Natural England would outlaw any scheme that was proved to be the case like that anyway. So as regards the comment around the rent increase, yeah. So when I said that the National Universal Credit and Benefit schemes take account of the fact that the rent policy is the CPI +1, yes, that would wholly take account of that. So someone who has their full rent paid by Universal Credit would continue to have their full rent paid by Universal Credit, because Universal Credit, you know, accepts that rents are going up by CPI, or the DWP accept rents going up by CPI +1, and account for that in when they reset their allowances there. So that's when we say the people in need of assistance the most, those who are really struggling through this current time, you know, many of those don't whilst they do pay rent, they pay it through the Universal Credit, you know, many of them actually say, well, I don't actually pay housing rent because the Universal Credit pays that. So any changes to that rent, they don't see that change. So that rent increase won't impact those who are hit hardest through the current scheme. So I suppose that hopefully that reassures you on that point in particular.
Councillor Lurney, did you want to make a comment at this point?
Yes, I did. I think it's important to say that we have had a good look at this and had a look at the implications. The government is actually setting this CPI +1% because it recognised that previously, when it imposed rent freezes and decreases, it was actually damaging the sustainability of council housing overall and diminishing our capacity to not only invest in our existing housing but to invest in new housing. We have a very ambitious new homes programme. I mean, the £500,000 you talked about effectively represents, you know, 2 homes, you know, 2 people, 2 families not housed, but also 30, 40 years of rent on those properties. You know, it all adds up as you go through. And I think one of our priorities has to be to provide significant amounts of housing, which we will still be providing as much as possible at those social rent levels. I mean, I think there is a danger that if we keep those those rents too low on one side, then also the new homes will have to be charging more for, you know, ultimately, which is a problem. 60% of our tenants are in receipt of some kind of benefit. We've seen a big increase in tenants on universal credit in the past year. So that's gone from 400 tenants to 1,000 tenants. So that's a significant rise. So more than half of our tenants wouldn't see the benefit of a rent-free week. And actually, for those on benefits, it gets worse than that, because it would be their responsibility to report, or certainly for those on universal credit, it becomes their responsibility to report the fact that they're not paying this rent, you know, and then it complicates all of their benefit claims. So not only do they see no financial benefit, but it actually causes them problems. I think that's why it's really important that we work with tenants on this. Clearly, we have capacity to add extra tenant support, and indeed potentially to offer tenants extra benefits, you know, rather than just leaving those what are significant balances within the HRA. So we have to think about how we use those balances to best help tenants. We've talked about the hardship funds potentially, and we can look at that, but it may well be that there are other things we can do that would benefit tenants more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Loney. I think that's really helpful. We'll come back to the proposal at the end of this session. I've got Councillor Horrell, questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just whilst we're coming off the issue of the rents, I welcome Mr. Botham's proposal to think about a hardship fund. I think targeting the money at those who are most in need, you know, we have good skills at that, and I think we should embrace that as a group and say that's how we'd like you to proceed. And I think that will be funneling perhaps some cash to those who most need it. So I think that would be helpful. Chair, I'm raising one point that you have already sort of identified, and last time we had a very brief, if I may say, discussion about the housing development strategy, not at the level that you would expect for this policy committee. And I see on the forward plan it's coming to the March cabinet meeting, and I'm really concerned that the policy committee hasn't done due diligence on such an important document. We were sort of marginalised last time on time, and tonight I know we're talking about a lot, but they're such important issues, and I'm really concerned that that is coming through to cabinet and it has not had proper review. A few PowerPoint charts is not how the housing development strategy, in my opinion and the opinion of many others, should be reviewed. And I just seek your support, Chair, and that of Mr. Botham, to really think about how these documents are coming through, because they're too important. They are fundamental to the operation of the council and our very long-standing positive delivery on housing, but I just don't understand how we can say that we've done due diligence on that paper. So I know, Chair, you've sort of mentioned the positioning of the housing discussion on the agenda, so I welcome that point from you. Chair, the other thing I think we've mentioned tonight, and I'm a great advocate for the TACT input, and I'm grateful to all of the TACT members who are volunteers and make huge efforts to join in. But the other evening, we had technical issues that stopped the TACT team being able to participate in one of our committee meetings. So I think it's probably time that we did a 90-degree turn as a group, because we all want them involved and we all embrace it and we welcome their input. Just how do we do that more effectively? Because we keep getting diverted. And so my challenge to Mr. Botham and the team is, how do we do it more effectively so that Monica and the TAC team in full can have that voice which they're very positively bringing to the table? And then the final question I have for Mr. Botham, Chair, is around rough sleeping. It worries me that we have the exploration of a new and flexible local outreach offer on the chart this evening, because we had outreach officers and we've taken a head out of our head count. I'm really sorry, Chair, but I don't think that's the place to be taking headcounts out right now. I think outreach is one of those areas that we should be working proactively and positively on. And as a council, we have a duty of care. We have a responsibility to those rough sleeping. And so I would challenge that should be a budget cut. I think we should be actually maintaining that and working with partners. I accept that, but actually my challenge to Mr. Botham is, why do we think that is the right thing to do? And also on City Road, given that has fulfilled some really positive provision for us, my challenge to Mr. Botham is, why aren't we purchasing it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Horrell. And I take up your point on the papers coming forward. I think Mr. Botham's suggestion about retiming this meeting is critical, but I do think there's a conversation to be had about getting some the key papers coming to this committee, that we should be doing the scrutiny or in advance, not after the event on some of these papers. So I do thoroughly agree with you on that. Mr. Botham, would you like to take some of the questions?
Yeah, certainly, and I would echo that as well. We have had a conversation as officers that in reviewing the recent meetings of this committee, as well as the Health and Environment Committee as well, it has emerged into a whole series of PowerPoints rather than detailed papers coming through, and that's really where I think you as members can really add value, is in looking at not early drafts but sort of well-formed drafts of proposals, policies, and that sort of thing. So just I'd like members to be assured that we are considering how we can best respond to that, and I would accept your challenge on documents such as the housing strategy, the development strategy. That is something that I'll discuss with Councillor Lerney and the Cabinet about, has that had sufficient scrutiny, and we'll consider what could be done around that. As regards how we can support Monica and David and TACT to make the representations effectively, we do continue to the resident involvement team work with TACT around training, establishing systems, and I think the last TACT meeting was more effective at the way we managed that whole discussion virtually. We've yet to crack it, I think, as far as how we integrate that whole involvement through the committee process. So yeah, that's again, accept that challenge, and something that we'll be discussing with TACT separately about how we can improve that and make that work better. And again, on rough sleeping, again, I'm accepting all of your challenges. I think we had that discussion. You raised that point again at scrutiny, and it isn't the proposal isn't that we don't think outreach is important. Outreach is critical to addressing rough sleeping. The previous approach to outreach had its limitations, I think, and when the officer that was responsible for delivering that left the council, we did take a step back and think, do we need to do this differently? Is just one outreach officer the right way to do that? I don't want to say too much, because obviously Gillian Knight, as the corporate head of services, has views on how she wants to bring that service forward. I suppose I want to reassure that we can't address rough sleeping without an effective outreach service. I do recognise the importance of it, and it is an area that currently the team are currently delivering outreach. They're doing it slightly differently than just that regular early morning visit that the officer used to do, and working with our partners. We think we can do it better by working with our partners, but we need to be able to demonstrate that and articulate it more than we can at the moment. So we'll come back to members once the corporate head has a proper solution to that. Then we'll update you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Botham.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Horrell, and for your support on the proposal regarding the additional financial support. I will come back to it at the end of this session just to confirm where we are on that. Do I have any? Oh, Councillor Lerney, you wanted to say something here.
Yes, just to add a little. Yeah, I think we were seeing diminishing returns from the previous ways we were doing outreach, and I think it's important that we do take the opportunity to, as Richard says, take a step back and have a look at how we're delivering that service. Certainly we need to look at how we manage weekend working while still providing that steady, regular service where homeless people know that there will be somebody around at particular times of the day and particular times of the week. So we're very conscious that that is an issue, and we'll certainly be coming back when we've established exactly how we're going to do that. I recognise the issue around the papers, but I think it's important to say that when scrutiny did have the PowerPoint on the development strategy, it didn't actually exist as such as a paper. So I think it's really good actually that this body does get those really early looks at thinking and the opportunity to contribute at that point. But clearly, ideally, timing would have allowed us to bring the actual paper back to this group before it heads to cabinet, and we'll definitely have to look at the timing of some of these things going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Power, I saw Councillor Scott's name come up. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak at this moment?
None. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Scott, did you want debate?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. This is obviously one of my favourite subjects of the council, so I could not come into debate, and really thank the team. But first of all, thank you, Chair, for answering my first question, because I think we're not doing due diligence to the housing section at this moment in time. It's no fault of anyone else. So sometimes a new administration will come in and sometimes sweep away what was already there. I have said many times, I think I've said it in full council, that I do believe that cabinet housing was, or some form of housing meeting, was a very good thing, because it is a big subject. It covers a lot of topics, and also then will give opportunity for places like TACT to get their teeth into it as well, so that the residents will feel, tenants will feel involved in the discussions and question making of the council. So maybe perhaps it's one thought of the administration above this meeting to actually reconsider exactly, are we doing due diligence to the business side of the council earlier on this structure of meeting, and to the housing. That said, I really want to thank the a few particular officers in this section. Kenna, with the private housing sector, have a fantastic issue with mould recently. Rachel obviously helped with the fire recently, and with Charlotte Quinn's helping some allocation. Sometimes we just don't offer our thanks to specific heads of the housing sector. I would also, I think Councillor Lerney offered some sort of token gesture to me in scrutiny the other day to say regarding sort of the community aspects of life on the estates. And I'm sure if the offer is still there, Councillor Lerney, I'll take you up on it, and more than happy to meet with you regarding action days and street meets and the way forward, such as Mrs. Russell has mentioned today, looking forward outside of COVID and what things can do. So, Councillor Lerney, I would love to take your offer up that I think you offered me in scrutiny recently, to meet with perhaps yourself, Mrs. Knight and Mrs. Russell as well, to discuss the way ahead and bring my old community development skills to the table as well. But I want to thank the Housing Department, because they always are on hand throughout COVID, especially the tenancy team and the estates team have been very active and very visible for our estates, and I do want to thank them specifically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Power.
No other speakers registered, Chairman.
Okay. Well, Councillor Lumby.
Sorry, Chair, very quickly, because I know you're trying to wrap up. I'm sure there's a gin and tonic waiting for you, and I'm all that's between you and it.
I have to say, Councillor Lumby, they've turned the heating off here. That's what.
Oh no! Do star jumps, but turn the camera off first. Just very quickly, I got the giggles now. Very quickly, just on the proposal which Mr. Botham put and which Councillor Horror mentioned in terms of the hardship fund. I hope that is something that will be taken away, will be looked at seriously, and actually sort of proper allocation given to it. I was slightly concerned that Councillor Lerny sort of implication was that actually, you know, this was a bit of a going through an exercise and it would be a bit token. I'm sure that was just me misinterpreting what she was saying, and I do hope that isn't the case, because I do think this is a difficult time for many people, and when we're taking extra money off people, finding a way to help them and give a bit back through a hardship fund or other way is a really good idea, and I do hope that is pursued actively and brought back with some good recommendations, and they are put into effect. Thank you, Chair, and well done on holding off on the star jumps.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. And I think, yes, just to wrap up on that, I looking at page 47, proposed to have a review of a number of the points that were brought up here and to bring back proposals to this committee. The sense I get is that we endorse the proposal that is put forward there. Clearly there's a strong support for looking at the hardship fund and how we might deploy that, targeting it to those who most need it. So I'm grateful to officers for responding quickly on that and bringing those proposals forward, and we will look forward to hearing a response on that at the next meeting. Perhaps we could have some discussion between times on how that's going to be approached. And I also thank everybody for the discussion and the support for the work around mental health. I think that is going to be a growing theme for this committee in the future, and also appreciate the positive response to building capacity among our trades teams to support our zero carbon strategy, both within our own housing stock and in the wider private sector housing stock. Unless there is anything else that anybody would like to add, I think we can close the meeting on that point. Thank you all for the time you've taken and the effort that's going into supporting these services through the continuing difficulties. Thank you.